And like I said, a lot of the decision-making, a lot of the thinking at the time was based on fear and some irrationality. And as a result, there were several myths regarding LSD use and LSD and health. Things like chromosome damage. This hit the front pages when a study suggested that there might be a link between LSD and chromosome damage. All over the media, that LSD causes irreversible damage to people's genome. 1 or 2 years later, more detailed, better designed studies came out and showed almost indisputably that LSD was not responsible for chromosome damage, and that wasn't reported nearly as much as the initial report that LSD was responsible. So chromosome damage doesn't happen. Same thing with leukemia. There was at one point a link hypothesized between certain kinds of leukemia and LSD. That again never really happened, wasn't true. There was a story out, an urban myth, about two young college students who took LSD and then stared at the sun until they went blind. I think it was sometime in the mid-70s that a politician in Pennsylvania came clean and said that he made that story up to scare kids out of not doing drugs. So again, not true. I think we've all, or most of us, have heard the story about children's tattoos being laced with LSD, so be careful when you go out on Halloween, and if anybody gives you one of those lick-em-stick-em tattoos, you better throw it away. Once again, there's been not one reported incidence of this ever happening. And finally, there's rumors, particularly among college students, that strychnine is somehow involved in the manufacture of LSD, that it's either required to kick LSD into your system or that it's needed to keep LSD sticking to the blotter paper. There was one report of a batch of LSD being adulterated with strychnine, but that was powdered LSD. There's never been a case of blotter acid being contaminated with strychnine. So again, that's something of an urban myth amongst users. Oh. How do I get back to that? There we go. For those of you who can't read it, it says, "Sorry, son, but for you to understand what happened, you have to first understand that back in the 60s, we were all taking a lot of drugs." So now you know that's not true. So now we'll talk about some of the more recent work that's been done. Psychedelic research is gradually coming back. In Switzerland, between '88 and '93, Bloch et al. Did a retrospective study with 171 subjects looking at MDMA and LSD-assisted psychotherapy, because these are legal modalities of treatment in that country. In 1996, Spitzer looked at the cognitive effects of psilocybin and found that it increased indirect semantic priming. In '98, in Germany, Hermle et al. Looked at blood flow and cerebral laterality with mescaline. And finally, in '99, Guzoulis, Mayfrank et al. Looked at the neurometabolic effects of psilocybin and some other drugs in healthy volunteers. There are currently projects in progress or under development. Kurland at Baltimore is looking at using LSD in the treatment of cancer patients. This project is currently on hold at the FDA. Matthew in Durham is looking at using mescaline in healthy human volunteers and examining religious experiences. Charles Grobe at UCSD just got approval for using psilocybin in the terminally ill. Vollenweider in Switzerland is doing basic dose-response safety studies with psilocybin, and Torsten Passy and others in Germany are doing a study using healthy physician volunteers and looking at some of the neuropsychological and neurobehavior effects of psilocybin. Drugs. There have also been recent or will be studies with ecstasy, with MDE, DMT, ibogaine, ayahuasca, ketamine, and salvia divinorum. If you are interested in these studies, you can go to the MAPS website, maps.org. It's a pretty fascinating website. It has a list of all the current and recent research studies going on. And finally, we come to our own work. Our research subject is our research study is entitled Effects of Psilocybin in OCD. Started out in 1997 when the good Dr. Moreno and Dr. Delgado were seeing a patient together, and this patient had very treatment-resistant and severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. And he happened to mention to them that, gee, docs, when I take psilocybin, it tends to make my OCD better, not just during the trip, but for a period of time afterwards. So our two good doctors thought that was really interesting and got it published as a case report in the American Journal of Psychiatry. Now, psychedelic-induced relief of OCD symptoms is supported by the anecdotal evidence, because if you do a lit search, you find that there are several other case reports like this one with LSD use and with psilocybin use. It makes psychopharmacological sense that because these drugs are very potent serotonin agonists and affect that system in the brain, remember that that's the same system that we are enhancing or tweaking when we treat obsessive-compulsive disorder. So in this study, our long-term objective is to evaluate the safety and tolerability of psilocybin in human subjects. This is an FDA phase 1 study, which means that the primary goal is establishing safety in humans. And please note that we're looking these days at a primarily pharmacological, not a psychotherapeutic mechanism of action. Some short-term questions that we hope to ask. We hope to gather pilot data to point us in the right direction regarding the answers to these questions. Does psilocybin lead to a reduction in the symptoms of OCD, and that we can measure? And is a full hallucinogenic dose required to demonstrate a significant reduction in the symptoms? Meaning, does a person have to have a dose that gives them a full-blown psychedelic experience in order to experience relief of their OCD? You're just stretching?
Yeah, I'm stretching.